The wind screamed across the alien marketplace, carrying the smell of metal and dust. Bright lights flickered between tall, rusted towers, and the sound of shouting traders filled the air. Captain Daniel walked through the narrow path between stalls, his eyes scanning for the small workshop that sold ship parts. His boots crunched on broken stone, and his long coat brushed against strange fabrics hanging from the sides. Everywhere he looked, alien faces turned quickly away from him, whispering in a language he barely understood. Daniel was used to strange planets, but this place felt different. There was tension in the air. It's a kind that makes your hand rest on your weapon without thinking. He adjusted the strap of the blaster on his hip, his steps careful but steady. He had only one goal: fix his ship and get off this planet before nightfall. But fate had other plans. As he passed a row of food stalls, a sudden movement caught his attention from the shadows between two buildings. A figure stepped forward. It was a woman, her skin pale blue with faint silver patterns like moonlight across water. Her eyes were large, glowing faintly in the dim light, and in her arms she held a small child. Another child clung to her leg. Staring at Daniel with wide, frightened eyes, Daniel slowed down. Unsure, the woman moved closer, her voice shaking but urgent. "Please, marry me," she whispered. Daniel froze, certain he had misheard. "What?" he asked, his voice low, glancing around to see if anyone was listening. The woman took a quick breath, looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. Her hands trembled, but she held the child tight. "You are human. A traveler. Please, take me as your wife. Save my children," she said. Her voice broke on the last words, and Daniel noticed the way the older child's small hand gripped her leg like a lifeline. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Again, this was insane, he thought. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she would ask something so wild. But there was fear in her eyes. A kind of fear he had seen before, the kind people feel when death is close. From the corner of his vision, Daniel noticed a group of tall, not armed figures watching from across the market. Their armor was black, with sharp, bone-like edges, and their eyes glowed red under their helmets. They didn't move, but their attention was fixed on the woman and her children. Daniel's instincts told him this was trouble. "I think you've got the wrong person," Daniel said, his tone firm, but not unkind. The woman shook her head desperately. "No, please, there is no time. If you don't, they will take my children tonight," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Daniel glanced again at the armored figures, still watching. He could feel the danger pressing closer. The woman stepped even nearer, so close he could see the faint scars on her face. "I am Lyra," she said quickly. "My husband is dead. The raiders killed him. They will come for us. Only a husband can protect a family under our law." Her voice cracked again, and the younger child hid their face in her neck. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had planned to fix his ship and leave this planet behind, but this was no ordinary request. This was a plea for survival. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of boots on stone. Daniel looked past Lyra and saw the red-eyed figures begin to move slowly through the crowd. They were coming this way. He felt his pulse quicken, his hand brushing the grip of his blaster. Part of him wanted to walk away. This wasn't his fight, but another part, the part that had kept him alive through war and loss, told him he couldn't just leave. Lyra's eyes locked on his, full of silent begging. "You are my only chance," she said. Her voice was steady now, but the fear was still there. The older child stepped forward slightly, holding a small cloth doll. Looking up at Daniel as if waiting for his answer, the sound of the marketplace seemed to fade, replaced by the heavy thud of armored boots drawing closer. Daniel's mind raced. Marry a stranger, get involved in local law. Anger-armed raiders, all of it was madness. But if he refused, those children might not see another day. He took a deep breath, looking from Lyra to the approaching danger. "All right," he said at last. "But you need to tell me everything." Relief washed over Lyra's face for just a moment, but it was quickly replaced by urgency. She turned sharply, gesturing for him to follow. "Come, quickly." "Before they reach us," she said. Daniel followed her into a narrow side street, the children staying close to their mother. Behind them, the sound of boots grew louder, the red glow of the raiders' eyes cutting through the darkening air. They disappeared into the twisting alleys, but Daniel knew the danger was far from over. Somewhere deep inside, he realized his life had just changed. Not because of the strange planet or the armed men, but because of the desperate plea of an alien widow he had never met before today, and the dangerous promise he had just made. The alley was narrow and dark, the walls on each side covered in strange glowing moss. Daniel followed Lyra as she moved quickly, her children clutching her dress. The sounds of the market faded behind them, replaced by the quiet hum of power lines overhead. Her pace was fast, but every few steps she glanced back to make sure he was still there. She didn't speak until they reached a small, broken door at the end of the alley. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of metal and herbs. The home was simple: one table, 2 chairs, and a few blankets spread across the floor. A small cooking pot rested over a low heat, and the walls were patched with scraps of old metal. Plates. Daniel stepped inside, his eyes scanning every corner. Lyra shut the door behind them, sliding a heavy lock into place. For a moment, no one spoke. The younger child sat near the fire, hugging their knees. The older one leaned against the wall, watching Daniel with a mix of curiosity and fear. Lyra stood in the center, her hands clasped tightly together when she finally spoke. Her voice was calm but heavy with sadness. "My husband. He was a builder," she began. "He worked in the city docks, fixing engines and making tools for traders." Her eyes lowered, as if remembering something painful. "One night, the raiders came. They wanted him to work for them, to build weapons." She shook her head slowly. "He refused, so they killed him." Daniel stayed silent, letting her speak. "They came to our home, looking for something. Something my husband had hidden," she continued. "I told them I didn't know what it was, but they didn't believe me." Her hands trembled as she spoke, but she didn't stop. "They said they would take my children unless I gave them the secret." Daniel's brow furrowed. "What secret?" he asked, his voice quiet. Lyra shook her head. "I don't know. Truly, I don't," she said. "But the raiders, they think I do." She took a deep breath, her glowing eyes meeting his. "In our law, a widow has no protection. She can be taken, her children sold." Her voice broke slightly. "But if I have a husband, no one can touch us without facing the council." Daniel understood now. It wasn't about love or tradition. It was about survival. He looked at the children, their small faces pale with worry. The older one clutched the cloth doll tighter. "How many days do you have?" Daniel asked. Lyra's voice lowered to a whisper. "Not days. Hours," she said. "They will come tonight, before the moon's rise." Daniel's mind ran through the possibilities. He could walk away and be on his ship by dawn, or he could stay and be pulled into someone else's war. The choice should have been easy. He had survived by keeping his head down and avoiding trouble. But he could feel the fear in the room, like cold air pressing against his skin. Lyra stepped closer. "I have no family left," she said. "My children. They will not survive without me, and I will not survive without help." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her voice stayed steady. "You are the only human here. The raiders do not know you. They will not expect this." Daniel crossed his arms, studying her. "If I agree, it makes me a target," he said. "It means they will come after me too." Lyra nodded slowly. Yes. But if you leave now, you will hear their screams before you reach your ship. The words struck him harder than he expected. She wasn't pleading anymore. She was telling him a truth he couldn't ignore. Outside, faint voices echoed down. The alley growing closer. The shadows on the wall shifted as boots crunched on stone. Daniel's hand went to his blaster, his instincts waking fully. Lyra moved quickly, kneeling beside a small chest under the table. From it, she pulled a thin piece of metal with strange markings burned into it. She pressed it into Daniel's hand. "My husband told me to give this to someone I trust," she said. "I don't know what it is, but if you take us with you, I will give it to you." Daniel glanced at the object. It was warm to the touch, the markings faintly glowing. Something about it felt dangerous. He slipped it into his coat without thinking. The sound of boots outside stopped, replaced by a low, distorted voice. It was speaking in the alien tongue, but Lyra's face went pale. "They are here," she whispered. Her children ran to her, holding her legs tightly. Daniel's heart pounded. He wasn't sure if this was bravery or madness. But he knew one thing. If he left now, their blood would be on his hands. He met Lyra's eyes and gave a single nod. "All right," he said. "I'll do it." Her relief was so strong it almost knocked her to her knees. But the moment was short. The door shook under a heavy blow. The raiders were no longer waiting. Daniel drew his blaster, his mind already thinking of escape routes, whatever he had just agreed to. There was no turning back now. The second knock was harder, metal against metal. Lyra pulled her children. Behind her, Daniel stepped toward the door. The hum of the weapon in his hand filled the air, and the night outside seemed to hold its breath. The door rattled again, harder this time. Dust drifted down from the ceiling, and the younger child whimpered. Daniel stood with his blaster ready, his finger near the trigger, outside. The raiders shouted in their guttural language, the words, sharp and commanding. Lyra's face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "They will break the door, take us, and kill you if you resist." Her voice carried no panic now, only certainty. Daniel glanced at her. Then at the two small figures clinging to her legs. He could see it in their faces. They had already lost too much. Another heavy blow shook the door. Daniel's mind raced. Every instinct told him to avoid this fight. He had survived years of dangerous jobs by staying out of other people's wars. And yet, here he was, standing between a desperate family and armed killers. He thought about his ship, waiting in the docking bay. He could still make it there before. The raiders spread through the city. Leave this place, leave this problem. Pretend it never happened. But the image of the children's terrified eyes made the thought feel like poison. He wasn't sure if this was courage or foolishness. A sharp crack split the air. Part of the doorframe broke under the force of the next hit. Daniel stepped back, aiming at the door. He spoke without looking away. "If I agree to this, if I take you as my wife, it puts a target on me." Lyra nodded once. "Yes, but it also means they can't take us without breaking the law." The older child looked up at him, clutching the small cloth doll tighter. Daniel felt something shift inside him, a decision forming before he could stop it. He had lost people before, and he knew that weight. He couldn't let these children feel it again. He exhaled slowly, his voice firm. "All right," he said. "I'll do it." Lyra's breath caught, a mix of relief and disbelief for a moment. Her shoulders loosened, but then she straightened. "Then we must leave now," she said. "They will not wait for a council meeting. They will take us before anyone can stop them." The door shook again. Harder. Daniel glanced at the back of the room. A small metal hatch sat low on the wall. "That your way out?" he asked. Lyra nodded. "It leads to the old water tunnels." "They don't know about it." Daniel motioned to the children. "Get them through. I'll cover you." Lyra moved quickly, pushing the hatch open, the smell of damp stone rising. From the darkness, she guided the children inside, whispering for them to stay quiet. Another blow hit the door. The lock was bending. Daniel's pulse quickened, his eyes fixed on the splintering wood. He fired a warning shot into the wall. Beside the door, the sound echoing like thunder. The raiders paused for a heartbeat, then roared in anger. Daniel used that moment to dive into the hatch, pulling it shut behind him. Darkness swallowed them, the only light a faint glow from Lyra's eyes. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to move in single file. Water dripped from above, each drop. Sounding louder than it should, "They will follow." Daniel whispered, "Yes," Lyra replied, "but we have a head start. If we reach the east gate, we can get to your ship." Daniel nodded, moving faster. The children's small footsteps splashed in the shallow water. He kept glancing back, expecting to see red eyes in the dark. After several minutes, the tunnel widened into a circular chamber. An old ladder led upward, the metal rusted but solid. Lyra motioned for the children to climb first. Daniel helping them reach each rung, she followed, her dress catching on the metal once, tearing slightly. Daniel was last, his blaster still in hand. They emerged into a deserted alley, the night air cool against their skin, the city's main. Lights glowed faintly in the distance. Daniel scanned the shadows, listening for pursuit, for now. It was quiet, too quiet. He turned to Lyra. "Tell me exactly what we're walking into," he said. She hesitated, then spoke. "The raiders are not just thieves. They work for someone powerful, someone who wants control of this planet." Her voice was low. "My husband discovered something in the old shipyards, something worth killing for." Daniel frowned. "And you don't know what it is?" She shook her head. "No. But they think I do, and now they will think you do as well." The weight of her words settled heavily on him. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a step into a fight he didn't fully understand, but he had made his choice in the distance. A deep horn sounded a warning signal. Lyra's eyes widened. "They know we escaped," she said. Daniel adjusted the strap of his blaster. "Then we don't stop moving," he replied. They slipped into the maze of side streets, keeping to the shadows. The children stayed close, their small hands gripping their mother's dress. Daniel kept scanning for movement. His mind replayed the moment in the market when she had first appeared before him. He realized it had only been minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. The decision was made, and there was no going back. Ahead lay danger, uncertainty, and possibly death, but behind them was a fate he couldn't let happen. So Daniel kept moving, his steps steady. The choice was his, and he had chosen to fight. The night wrapped around them like a heavy cloak. Daniel led the way through the twisting streets, always staying in the shadows. Every sound made him glance over his shoulder, the distant clank of metal, the echo of footsteps, the low hum of a patrolling drone. Lyra followed close behind with the children, her glowing eyes scanning the dark corners. They moved quickly, heading toward the outer edge of the city. After several turns, Lyra slowed and touched Daniel's arm. "This way," she whispered, pointing toward a narrow path between two leaning towers. Daniel frowned. "That's not toward the docking bay," he said. She shook her head. "No. First, there's something you must see." They slipped through the narrow passage, the air damp and cold. At the end stood a small metal door, half hidden under layers of rust. Lyra knelt beside it and pressed her hand against a flat panel near the frame. A faint light scanned her palm, and with a quiet click, the door slid open. Daniel raised an eyebrow. This was no ordinary home entrance. Inside, the space was larger than it looked from outside. Dim blue lights lined the walls, and strange machines sat in the corners under dusty covers. The air smelled faintly of ozone, the kind you get near powerful energy sources. Daniel stepped inside. his boots crunching on scattered tools. The children stayed near the doorway, as if they'd been told never to touch anything here. Lyra closed the door and moved toward a low platform in the center of the room. With a wave of her hand, a section of the floor slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. From it, she pulled a small metal case, its surface etched with the same glowing symbols Daniel had seen on the piece she gave him earlier. "This," she said softly, "is why my husband died." Daniel stepped closer. "What is it?" he asked. Lyra hesitated before placing the case on the platform. When she pressed a button on its side, the case unfolded. Revealing a sphere the size of a fist, it floated gently above the platform, its surface shifting like liquid metal. "It's an engine core. But not like any from this world," Lyra said. "My husband found it in the ruins of an old shipyard, deep under the city." She looked at Daniel, her voice low. "He said it could power a vessel for 100 years without fuel, or be turned into a weapon that could destroy an entire fleet." Daniel stared at the sphere, its shifting surface reflecting the dim light. He had seen powerful tech before, but nothing like this. Why didn't he give it to the council? He asked. Lyra's expression darkened. He didn't trust them. He said some of them were already working with the raiders. The weight of her words sank in. This wasn't just about her family's safety anymore. This was about something far bigger, something people would kill for without hesitation. Lyra carefully closed the case, locking it again. "They think I know where it is. And now, they will think you do too," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. She was right. Outside, a faint rumble passed through the ground. Lyra's eyes widened. "They're searching the city," she said, using ground scanners. Daniel glanced at the children, who were watching silently. "We can't stay here," he said. "If they're scanning, they'll find this place." Lyra nodded, lifting the case and slipping it into a cloth satchel. Daniel moved to the door, peeking outside. The street was empty, but a red glow flickered faintly in the distance. He motioned for them to follow. They slipped out and moved quickly, keeping the towers between them and the glow as they walked. Daniel's mind worked through the possibilities. If the raiders got the core, they could control not just this planet, but every trade route in the sector. That meant others, governments, warlords, pirates, would come for it too. And here he was, stuck in the middle with a widow, too. Children, and a piece of tech worth countless lives. They reached a raised walkway overlooking the east side of the city. Far below, the lights of the docking bay shone faintly. Daniel felt a flicker of hope. They were getting closer. But that hope dimmed when a deep horn echoed through the air again. This time, much closer. "They know we're near the edge," Lyra whispered. The children's steps quickened, their small hands clutching her dress. Daniel scanned the shadows. "We need another way to the docks," he said. Lyra thought for a moment, then pointed toward a cluster of old cargo lifts. "They're not used anymore, but they connect to the maintenance tunnels under the bay." It was risky, but Daniel nodded. Better than walking straight into a raider checkpoint. They turned toward the lifts, their steps quick and quiet. Somewhere behind them, a sharp, metallic cry echoed in the streets. Daniel had heard that sound before. It was a hunter drone. They were running out of time. They reached the cargo lifts, the metal platforms covered in dust. Lyra moved to a control panel and began pressing a sequence of buttons. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lift shuddered and began to descend. Into darkness, Daniel kept his blaster ready, his eyes on the shadows above. If the raiders found the entrance, they'd be trapped. As the lift sank deeper, the air grew colder. The faint hum of machinery filled the silence. Daniel glanced at Lyra, who was holding the satchel close to her chest. Whatever this engine core was, it had already cost her a husband, and now it might cost them all their lives. The lift reached the bottom with a heavy clang. Before them stretched a long, dimly lit tunnel, leading toward the heart of the docking bay. Daniel stepped forward. "Stay close," he said, because now the only way out was through. The tunnel stretched ahead, dim lights flickering on the ceiling. Daniel moved first, blaster in hand, his eyes scanning the shadows. Lyra followed close behind with the children. Clutching the satchel to her chest, their footsteps echoed softly. Mixing with the distant hum of machinery, it almost felt quiet, too quiet. Halfway down the tunnel, Daniel stopped. He had heard something, a faint metallic scrape. He raised his hand for silence. His ears straining, the sound came again, closer. This time, it wasn't footsteps, it was sharper. Like claws on steel, Lyra's eyes widened. "They've found us," she whispered. Daniel turned, motioning for them to move faster. But before they could take more than a few steps, a shadow dropped from the ceiling ahead. It landed with a heavy thud, blocking their path. The creature was tall and armored. Its helmet shaped like a skull. 2 red lights glowed where its eyes should be, and mechanical tendrils moved slowly behind it. Daniel had seen raiders before, but this one was different, faster, stronger. It was a hunter unit, designed to track and kill without mercy. And now it stood between them and escape. Daniel fired first, the blaster shot slamming into its chest. The force pushed it back a step, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a low growl. The sound vibrating in the air, then it charged, moving. Far faster than its size should allow. Daniel rolled to the side, firing again. The shot hit its shoulder, sparks flying, but still it kept coming. "Run!" Daniel shouted. Lyra grabbed the children and pulled them toward the wall, trying to move past. The hunter swung one heavy arm. Smashing into the wall and blocking them, debris rained down, and the younger child screamed. Daniel aimed for its legs, this time, the blast knocking one knee out from under it. The hunter fell to one side, giving them a narrow opening. "Go, now!" Daniel barked. They rushed past, but the sound of metal scraping against stone told him it was getting back up. He ran after them, firing shots over his shoulder. The tunnel echoed with blaster fire and the clanging of metal boots. Ahead, the tunnel split in two, left. Lyra called, pulling the children that way. They sprinted down the side passage. The air growing colder. The hum of machinery grew louder, mixed with the heavy steps behind them. Daniel could tell the hunter wasn't slowing down. They burst into a wide chamber filled with old maintenance equipment. Pipes ran along the walls, steam leaking from cracks. Daniel quickly scanned the room. No exits except the one they came through and a grated vent high on the far wall. "It's too small for me," he said, "but you can fit." Lyra's eyes darted to the vent. Then to the children. "We'll go, but you, no time." Daniel cut her off. He ran to a large control panel and began pressing buttons. The ancient machinery hummed to life, steam hissing louder. The hunter stepped into the room, its glowing eyes locking on Daniel. Daniel raised his blaster and fired. Again, aiming for the head this time, the shot hit, the light in one eye flickering. But the machine didn't fall. "Climb!" Daniel shouted. Lyra lifted the younger child first, helping them through the vent. The older one followed, disappearing into the shadows beyond. Lyra grabbed the edge, pulling herself up. Daniel fired another shot, this one striking the hunter's chest plate and cracking it. The machine roared and charged. Daniel hit the final button on the panel, and a burst of superheated steam blasted from the pipes. It hit the hunter square in the face, the hiss filling the air. The machine staggered, its armor hissing and warping. Daniel used the moment to dive toward the vent. Pulling himself up, he crawled quickly, the metal warm under his hands, behind him. The sound of tearing metal echoed. The hunter was ripping through the vent wall. They reached a junction in the vent, and Daniel dropped down into another tunnel. Lyra and the children were already there, waiting without speaking. They ran. The tunnel sloped upward, and soon, the smell of oil and fuel grew stronger. Lights ahead marked the edge of the docking bay. Daniel allowed himself a single breath of relief. They were close, but then a loud crash behind them told him the hunter was still coming. This time, it wasn't alone. More footsteps joined it. Heavier and faster. They're sending more, Lyra said, her voice tight. Daniel tightened his grip on the blaster. Then we don't stop, he said. The tunnel opened into the bay's lower level, where cargo crates were stacked high. They ducked behind the crates, moving between them toward the upper ramps. Above, Daniel could see the faint outline of his ship. It looked small and fragile compared to the danger chasing them. But it was their only way out, somewhere behind them. The hunter's metal boots clanged against the floor. Daniel knew they only had seconds before the first shot was fired. And when it came, it wasn't aimed at him. It hit the crate beside Lyra, blasting it apart in a shower of sparks. The children screamed, and Daniel spun, returning fire. The air filled with the sharp smell of burnt metal. The first attack had begun, and there was no turning back. The docking bay stretched before them like a steel canyon. Bright floodlights glared down from tall towers. Casting long shadows between stacks of cargo crates, Daniel moved fast, keeping Lyra and the children close. The hunter's footsteps echoed from behind, heavy and certain. Every second they stayed here was a second closer to being caught. They ducked behind another crate. Daniel, taking a moment to scan the upper levels, his ship sat in the far corner, its silver hull reflecting. The harsh lights between them and safety lay open ground and several armed guards in black armor. They're blocking the ramps, Daniel muttered. Lyra followed his gaze, her eyes narrowing. Then we can't go through them, she said. We must go under. Daniel looked at her, unsure. Under. She pointed to a wide metal hatch. In the bay floor, partially hidden by a forklift, it leads to the coolant tunnels. They connect directly to the landing platforms, she said. Daniel frowned. Those tunnels are freezing, full of pipes, and probably crawling with security drones. Lyra met his eyes. Better than walking into their guns, the hunters. Voices echoed closer, sharp commands bouncing off the walls. Daniel knew they had seconds to decide. He took a breath, then nodded. All right, we'll take the tunnels. Lyra moved first, guiding the children toward the forklift, keeping low. Daniel followed. His blaster ready, scanning for movement, they reached the hatch, and Daniel pulled at the wheel lock. It groaned loudly, the sound carrying in the cavernous space. Above them, one of the guards turned his head. Daniel cursed under his breath. Pulling harder, the hatch gave way with a heavy clang, swinging open to reveal a narrow shaft. Go, he ordered. Lyra lowered the children one by one, their small feet disappearing into the dark. She followed, her hand gripping the ladder tightly. Daniel was last, closing the hatch above them as quietly as he could. The moment it shut, he heard shouts. The hunters had reached the bay. The shaft was narrow and cold, the air biting at their skin. The ladder ended in a low tunnel lined with thick pipes. Frost clinging to the metal, a pale blue light glowed faintly from strips along the floor. Daniel moved ahead, his breath misting in the frigid air. Lyra carried the satchel close, the children staying between them. The hum of flowing coolant filled the tunnel. Every so often, a jet of icy vapor hissed from a broken pipe, forcing them to duck. Daniel knew these tunnels were dangerous. One wrong step and a person could freeze in seconds. But he also knew the hunters wouldn't follow easily down here. Their armor wasn't built for this cold. They moved quickly, guided by Lyra's memory of the layout. 2 more turns, she said, her voice low. Daniel glanced at her. You've been down here before? She nodded. My husband used these tunnels to smuggle parts out of the shipyard. Before the raiders killed him, The mention of her husband brought a flicker of pain to her face, but she kept moving. Behind them, the faint clang of metal echoed, not loud, but enough to make Daniel's pulse quicken. "They're trying to track us," he said. Lyra's grip on the satchel tightened. "Then we must be faster." They turned a corner and found themselves at a wide, circular chamber. In the center, a large grate opened to a vertical shaft leading upward. Faint light poured in from above. The landing platforms, Daniel smiled slightly. This is it. But their relief didn't last. A loud metallic thud came from the tunnel they'd just left. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "They're here." Lyra's eyes darted to the children. "Get them up first." Daniel lifted the younger child, pushing them toward the ladder inside the shaft. Lyra guided them upward, then helped the older child. Daniel kept his blaster aimed at the tunnel entrance. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, sharper. Then, from the shadows, a red glow appeared. "Hunter eyes. Go, Lyra." Daniel ordered. She hesitated. "I'm not leaving you. Go." He snapped. She climbed quickly, disappearing into the light above. Daniel fired at the tunnel entrance, the shots lighting the cold air. The first hunter stepped into the chamber. Frost forming along its armor, it moved slower here. The cold affecting its joints, Daniel took the chance, hitting it with another shot to the chest. Sparks flew, and the machine staggered, but more red lights appeared behind it. There were at least 3. Daniel backed toward the ladder. Firing one last time before grabbing the rungs, his fingers burned from the cold metal, but he climbed. Fast, the hunter's shots hit the walls around him, sending shards of ice flying. Above, Lyra reached down, grabbing his arm and pulling hard. Together, they scrambled out onto the landing platform. The children stood beside the ship, eyes wide with fear. Daniel didn't hesitate. He pulled them toward the ramp. The roar of engines and the shouts of raiders filled the air behind them. Lyra glanced back at the hatch. "They're coming," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we take off now." The ship's engines rumbled to life, a deep vibration that ran through the platform. Daniel guided Lyra and the children up the ramp, his eyes darting to the shadows along the bay's walls. Red warning lights flashed overhead, and sirens began to blare, somewhere below. The hunter's metal boots pounded against steel. Getting closer, Lyra kept the children moving. Her hand never leaving the satchel, Daniel reached the cockpit and dropped into the pilot's seat, "Strap in." He called back. Lyra buckled the children into the crash seats, then slid into the co-pilot's chair. Her glowing eyes scanned the controls. "Can we lift off before they block us?" she asked. Daniel's hands moved over the switches, "If nothing breaks." Maybe. A sudden crack of gunfire ripped through the air. The ship's hull rang under the impact. Daniel cursed and activated the shield generator. A faint blue shimmer wrapped around the vessel, deflecting the next shot. But it wouldn't hold for long under heavy fire through the cockpit window. He saw figures moving between the cargo crates, dozens of raiders in black armor. Their weapons flashing, some were climbing toward the platform, others circling around to cut off their escape. Then, from the main bay doors, a massive figure emerged, the raider leader, taller than the rest. Wearing dark armor lined with bone-white plates, he walked with slow, deliberate steps in one hand. He carried a heavy blaster rifle in the other. Something small and metallic that glinted in the harsh light. Daniel's eyes narrowed. It was his ship's remote ignition key. The leader stopped at the edge of the platform, looking up at the cockpit. His helmet shifted slightly, and though Daniel couldn't see his eyes, he could feel the cold smile beneath it. The leader lifted the key and let it spin lazily in his hand, going somewhere. "Husband." His voice boomed through an amplified speaker. Lyra stiffened, her breath catching. The children's hands gripped the seat straps, eyes wide with fear. Daniel's mind raced without that key. The main engines wouldn't engage fully. They could lift off, but they'd have no speed, no jump capability, which meant the raiders could shoot them out of the sky before they got far. The leader seemed to know it. He tilted his head, almost mockingly. Lyra leaned closer to Daniel. Her voice low. He wants to trade. My life for the key. Daniel kept his eyes on the leader. He's not getting you, he said. Her jaw tightened. If we stay, he will take the children too. Below. The hunters emerged from the coolant hatch, their armor dripping with frost. They moved to flank the leader, forming a wall of red-eyed machines. The raider troops spread out, weapons raised. Daniel's hands tightened on the controls. They were boxed in. Lyra's gaze flicked to the satchel in her lap. She spoke. Quickly, if they want the core, let's give them something else. Daniel glanced at her. What are you thinking? Her eyes were steady, a distraction big enough to make them run. Before he could respond, she unzipped the satchel and pulled out the small metal case. The glowing symbols along its edges pulsed faintly in the light. She pressed a sequence of buttons on its side, and the sphere inside rose into the air, spinning slowly. Daniel's heart skipped. The hum it gave off was growing louder. What are you doing? He demanded. Overloading it, she said. Without the right stabilizer, it will create an energy surge. Not an explosion, but enough to knock out every system in this bay. Daniel's eyes widened. That meant the raiders' weapons. Their drones, even the hunters, all dead for at least a minute. But it also meant his ship systems would go offline too. We'll be grounded, he warned. Only for a minute, she replied. If you're ready, you can restart before. They do. The leader must have noticed the sphere's glow. He barked an order, and the raiders began moving faster. Daniel's heart pounded. They had seconds now. Do it, he said. Lyra's fingers moved over the controls. Locking the sphere into overload mode, a deep hum filled the bay, vibrating. Through the floor, the raiders hesitated, unsure. The leader raised his rifle, aiming straight for Lyra through the cockpit glass. Daniel yanked the controls, tilting the ship just enough for the shot to bounce off the shield. The hum grew too. A roar, and the light from the sphere turned blinding white. Lyra shouted. Now? Daniel slammed the auxiliary thrusters, lifting the ship off the platform. The moment they cleared the edge, the sphere released its surge. A wave of blue light rippled outward. Every light in the bay, flickering and dying, the raiders' weapons. Powered down, drones fell from the air, and the hunters froze mid-step. But the ship's systems went dark too. They hung in the air, drifting, the hum of the engines gone. Daniel's fingers flew over the manual restart sequence. Come on, he muttered. Below, the leader still stood, unmoving, but Daniel knew the moment power returned. The fight would begin again. The cockpit lights flickered, then steadied. Daniel's hands gripped the throttle. Lyra held the children close, her glowing eyes locked on the leader below. For a brief second, their gazes met a silent promise that this wasn't over. The ship's engines roared back to life. Daniel pushed the throttle forward. The ship shot upward, disappearing into the dark sky far below. In the shadows of the powerless bay, the raider leader slowly closed his hand around the ignition key. And though his weapons were dead, his voice carried up into the night. I'll find you, husband.